Hi, I'm Kim Gladden, Director of Discipleship, and I welcome you to today's webinar, Discipleship in Prisons and Sheltered Communities. I'm so glad that you've joined us for the discussion today. We're going to be talking about some discipleship models that have had a proven impact in prisons and sheltered communities. And I'm inviting you to join us in with your questions. Come on in the chat room, be a part of this discussion with your chats, your comments, and your own experiences. Joining me today on the platform, on the Zoom platform, I have Bernie Haddad, who is the founder of Mercy Unleashed. I have Dan Walker, who is our discipleship catalyst for social justice, and Deb Klutz, who is the executive director of the Homestead in Manhattan, Kansas. And we're just going to be talking today about this topic. You know, I have just a personal soft spot in my heart for vulnerable people, particularly those in prison. I just have, you know, as we talk about this topic today, I kind of hold it in my heart, and I just know that there have been so many times I've turned on the television or watched a report, and I've looked and seen all of, particularly these men of color, these Black men sitting warehoused in prison, and something in my heart just kind of breaks a little bit. And so I pause to just kind of lament for a moment. We're going to be celebrating what God is doing in these environments, but I just pause. I have a little personal, just a lament. Um, and so today we're asking again, come on, be part of this conversation. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to hear some exciting things that God is doing in our midst. So I want to start with you, Dan Walker. I want you to tell us just a little bit about who actually is in prison. Can you just begin the conversation by sharing with us?
Yeah, and Kim, if I can share a presentation as well, I will go ahead and do that. Let's get that up and running. So I do want to talk about kind of what does incarceration look like now in the United States in particular. And so just have a few statistics for us to look at and really culminating, we'll finish our short time in this with talking about who makes up those that are imprisoned. So first, what you have in front of you is really a picture of how many folks are being incarcerated in the United States. And so you see the growth of that, particularly on the right-hand side, some of the statistics of about 357,000 in 1970. You see significant growth into the 80s, really blossoming in the 90s, continued growth 2000 to 2014, where there's an exponential growth in the 80s, 90s, and into 2000s. And then you start to see a percentage drop off when we start to deal with this idea of mass incarceration. So not significantly doing something about the numbers of people who are incarcerated, but certainly starting to work on that. You see that in the early, the late 2000s, early 2010s. And so it kind of gives a picture of how many folks are involved in incarceration. And also just want to look at the rates of incarceration for the United States. We are right now incarcerating 693, some have it at the 698 level now in 2020 out of every 100,000 folks. Now you compare that to other countries. Here, this is comparing to the two other founding NATO members, the United Kingdom 145, Canada 114, Denmark 61. All of the other founding members are under 150 per 100,000. We don't have it in front of us, but you'll see really there's only a few other countries that are comparable to the United States in the number of folks per 100,000 being incarcerated. The United States has 5% of the world's population and 25% of those that are incarcerated, those imprisoned. And I also want to look at some of the money being involved in that. In 1985, $6.7 billion went into state expenditures, and in 2018, 60.9. So over these years, you're talking about a tenfold increase in the amount of money being spent on incarceration in the states. And then just want to talk about reasoning behind that and how those are connected. So the slide that you see in front of you really compares the incarceration rate and the violent crime rate and property crime rate. And so you see both the violent crime rate and the property crime rate fluctuating from 1981 to 2013, while at the same time, the incarceration rate continues to climb. So really asking this question, when the crime rates are fluctuating and then dropping significantly, you see in the 2001 really returning back to 1970 rates, which is not on this slide particularly, but you see them really dropping down significantly, all the while incarceration rates continue to increase. And then this slide is an excellent slide, just comparing particularly broken down by race and also by gender of who is getting incarcerated. So you see white men typically, and this is for someone born in 2001, 1 in 17 white men are going to end up being imprisoned or the likelihood of being imprisoned. For Latino men, it is 1 in 6. And then for Black men, it is 1 in every 3. 1 in every 3 Black men born in the United States in 2001 are likely to end up in prison. For women, the numbers are different, but a very similar ratio broken down between white, Black, and Latina. White women, 1 in 111, Latinas, 1 in 45, and Black women, 1 in 18. So really talking about the racial differences of who is ending up being incarcerated, who is ending up being imprisoned. And I just wanted to close with this really, and it's not talking about who is involved in it, but some of the different opportunities that could be there. This is a great video, a clip from a great video done by The Atlantic. And really, at a certain point, they said, we chose to respond not with prison as a last resort, but as prison as the first resort. That when people had different issues going on, we first imprisoned instead of looking at these other opportunities. Restorative justice, parole and probation, drug court and rehab. There's a lot of other opportunities that we could have worked towards, particularly being people of restorative justice. Working towards that could have been options, but we really ended up imprisoning a large portion. The very first slide that we had also talked about how 4.4 million are either on parole or probation, which really takes us up to over 6, almost 7 million people right now who are either imprisoned in one form or another, jail or prison, or are on parole or probation. And so when we talk about who this influences, it is a huge number. And then the likelihood of a child of color having a parent that has been incarcerated is 1 in 9. So when you look at the different populations involved, we're talking about huge numbers of people who are impacted by those that are incarcerated or either have been themselves or are connected to someone who has been incarcerated. So it's a very important thing for us to be considering in the conversation today.
Dan, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It just kind of gives us just a bit of context for our conversation. And we could have a whole nother, webinar on that. But today we want to talk about God breaking in, even in the midst of these statistics and knowing who's there, God breaking in. So I want to, again, just remind our listening audience, today's the type of conversation. Come on into the chat room, dialogue with us. And we want to go now to Bernie. Bernie, you have seen just something, I'm going to say miraculous, that has happened as you have established a ministry in prisons. But I want to stop and start by asking you, what sparked you to be involved in prison ministry? What was the first moment of inspiration for that? How did you get involved?
Well, hi, Kim. Thanks so much for having me on today. So it was totally a God thing. I had no personal experience with prison, unlike so many people that I know now that I'm in the prison business, if you will. I don't have a spouse or a child that's incarcerated, but God totally brought me to this. I was having a bad day one day in ministry, and I came home and I said, God, if you want me to be a pastor, then I need to understand where I'm supposed to go. And 30 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was a lady who is now a volunteer with Mercy Unleashed, who asked me, she said, I need a female pastor to help me on a weekend where we are going to be ministering to women whose lives have been affected by incarceration. So I completely took that as a sign from God. I went ahead and did that. And while I was there, I met people who liked the discipleship model that I was using with these particular women. And the next thing I know, I was in a meeting with a chaplain at Pendleton in Indiana, one of the maximum security prisons here. And he said, "Hey, when can you start here?" And me being me, I said, 30 days. And so from that point, I went to Starbucks, literally went to Starbucks, sat down and started a company. And that happened. And 30 days later, I had a team, I had a board of directors for my nonprofit, and we were inside the prisons teaching discipleship. And to touch just a little bit more on the numbers that Dan showed us, they're sobering statistics. But with the over 2 million people that are incarcerated, 2.3 million people incarcerated right now, what people need to understand is 95% of the people who are in prison will be released in their lifetime. They will become our neighbors. They will become the people who work in the restaurants, the people who are bagging our groceries. These are not people that are forgotten, that are just going to be put over a wall somewhere that we'll never see again. Every year, 600,000 people are released from prison. 600,000. And then every year, unfortunately, 600,000 people go back into prison. So that becomes the revolving door of mass incarceration, which is why it's so important to go inside the prisons and to remember the people who are in there. Um, as we have been in there, I've been teaching discipleship with my team, and we have been lucky enough to uh, make our way into several prisons in Indiana. And through discipleship, these men have just taken the ball and they have just run with it. We have been able to introduce them to the Banding Together curriculum that you can purchase through Wesleyan Publishing House. And we showed them how to do discipleships. We sit with them now, not right now because of COVID, but we were sitting with them in their day rooms, actually in the cell blocks with the men. And I specifically work with men who are incarcerated. As you can might have noticed with the numbers that Dan put up, only 10% of women are part of that incarceration number. And for whatever reason, God has called me and my team to work with men. And people will ask, well, how does that work with you all being women? And I will tell you, it works really, really well. I think the thing that works the best is the fact that we are women. So many people, so many of the men sitting in prisons because of incarceration factors, because of poverty factors, were not raised with fathers in their households. So they see us, we come in there, and they're used to a matriarchal, a woman-led family. And so when we come in, it's like family, and they trust us,
Yeah.
and it works just really, really well.
So Bernie, let's just back up a little bit because that's kind of the condensed version. But so you have this just kind of this opportunity that out of the blue you are asked, and praise God that you weren't inhibited by, oh, I've got to have a year to take and make a strategic plan, but you responded. So what was it like? Tell us about the beginning. What was it like your first time going in? What was it like? Where did you go? What happened? Were there any challenges in that entry? Give us a little bit more of the story.
So when we first went in, I took my team. I was able to gather quite a nice team of people. And the first time we went in, I took my team. People warned me before I went in, you're going to be really scared when you go in. That door is going to shut behind you. And when you hear that lock, you're going to know you're in prison. And I will tell you, God completely protected me from that. I had no fear. I had no fear. We went inside, and we were actually in the day room, in the cell blocks where the men live. So where they live, there are cell blocks in rows and tiers of housing, of cells. And we were right in the middle of all of that, sitting at the individual tables, talking with the men. And the only word I can come up with is they were so thankful. They were so thankful to see us. There has there was no fear. I felt right at home immediately. I was completely respected immediately. They've never called me anything but Pastor Bernie. Um, there's been no, I mean, it was just, it was completely God inspired. That's the only way I can put it. No fear at all. And we started out in our very first prison, which was it's called CIF, which is a medium security prison in Indiana, in Pendleton, Indiana. And we started out inside that prison with about maybe 20 guys on the first night. And what we do is we set them each at a table, and I put one volunteer at each table, and we teach them how to have discipleship groups. But only the first week do we lead. After that, I make the men take turns going around the table leading that discipleship group. And as the weeks went on and they led, uh, they started working it, because the point of discipleship groups are to learn how to make disciples. So you want to make disciples who will then make even more disciples. And that's what they did. Prison is just like a city, all within a huge building. And so they have their communities, they have their work communities, they have their friend communities, they have their communities within the subblocks where they live. And they were given the job of going to make disciples with these individuals, with the men that they work with in their communities. And that's what they did. And it just started growing and growing. So we would meet with them on Tuesday nights, and they would bring people from the cell block where they lived. They would bring people, but more times than not, they would say, "Hey, Pastor, I need more books because I've started a group with my guys at work, but they don't live in this cell block, so they can't come to this meeting. Can I have books for them?"
Wow, so they are making disciples within their community. We're going to come right back to that, Bernie. A question has come in from the chat room. We're going to jump back over to whoever wants to answer this, and then we're going to jump back into Bernie's story. But in the chat room, I think, Dan, they're going back to the slide that you were doing. And the question is, are those percentages of those in prison, and is fatherless household, that Bernie mentioned, the greater factor in the likelihood of incarceration? Those are questions that came in from the chat room. So whoever wants to jump on that.
Bernie, I think, go. I'm sure you have good stuff to say about that.
Yeah. So the greatest factor, believe it or not, of incarceration is reading. So what happens is there's something that happens between third and fourth grade with reading. In third grade is your last year where you're learning to read. In fourth grade, you're reading to learn. And the municipalities, cities, they build prisons based on that reading score that happens in between there. The children who don't make that cut over and learn to read to the point where they're teaching themselves and they're learning as they're reading, those are the people that are more likely to go to prison. Are those people then from fatherless homes in the inner city? Yes. Yes, that's where these children live. They are from poverty-stricken communities that don't have the resources, the communities that don't have the dads in the homes, the communities that have very high incarceration numbers already. And it's called the school to prison pipeline is what it's called. And that's where those statistics come from.
Bernie, now let's go back to the discipleship model, because many of us are familiar with that triad discipleship model. John West and the good work that he's been doing in many Wesleyan churches. Tell us how did you bring that in? I mean, when we think of people who are doing these conversations, were these men who had come to Christ in prison who were leading, or before they were in prison, and how did that work? Well, tell us about this discipleship model that is occurring in the midst. Now, there are many things going on in these prison communities. There's a lot of different layers. So yeah, let's like share. Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I know John, Pastor John West. He's actually on my board of directors, and I used to work with him at the previous church where I was employed. And so I was very familiar with that discipleship model with the Banding Together book. And the difference between my ministry, Mercy Unleashed, and other prison ministries is I do not go in there and seek the men who don't know Christ yet. I go in and I seek the men who already have a relationship with Christ. And then I teach them and equip them how to be the church. And that's the difference. And that, I think, is kind of the secret sauce, because instead of trying to do the evangelism, which evangelism is incredibly important, and I certainly do my fair amount in prison of that as well. But the discipleship, I'm only there for an hour a week in that particular prison. These men are there every day, all day, and they don't have a lot to do. And if you equip the Christians with the tools that they need to be the kingdom, to be the church, to grow the kingdom, then they go for it fully. They go for it. And so what we have seen happen is, once you get the discipleship groups growing, once you get the multiplication happening, you wind up with a church. So you have all of these people that are coming together on a regular basis to do discipleship, and they're training one another, and they're praying for one another, and they're holding one another accountable, and they're learning how to be better fathers, how to be better men, and their hearts are transformed. You have a church. And so then what happens is we get church plants. And so that's what happened to us in the Newcastle facility. We actually there's a Wesleyan church inside the Newcastle facility in Indiana, and it's called Eden Unleashed Wesleyan Church. And that is a church that I pastor. But since COVID, and this is the miracle, I think maybe that you were talking about, Kim, since COVID, I haven't been able to go inside. So I've not been in there in 7 months. My church, the church that I lead, that I haven't been to for 7 months, has grown exponentially. And all I had to do was get out of the way. The men on the inside are leading that church. They're meeting on a regular basis. And I even had the leader on the inside. He wrote a report for my district superintendent that was presented at a board meeting to give an update on how this Wesleyan church was doing. And we've
Wow.
had men come to Christ. We have discipleship groups that are meeting there 3 nights a week now. There's 200 men in this particular facility. It's what's called a level 1 facility, which means within 5 years or less, every one of these men will be back out on the streets, which is so important for them to know God and get that foundation so that they can take that transformed life and go forward. And so these men, they grew the discipleship platform, they grew the church, and there's no one there but them doing it. So God has fully equipped them.
Yes, but Bernie, I have to stop and comment, because this, you mention it like it's a small thing, but it's not a small thing, because you recognize potential in the men that you invested in. You know, a lot of people come into the prison and I'm the great I am, and I'm going to give this to you, and but you came in and you saw and recognized. So that's not a small thing. You saw and recognized, in the same way that when people go into communities, and it's asset based, because a lot of people go, hey, I'm starting from ground zero here in prison, but you said no, there's some folks who do know Christ, who are in here, and let me connect with them. So I don't want to just gloss over that point of you said that you called it the secret sauce, but I think that having that ability to recognize and see value, and you put some trust to allow them to participate in the leadership of discipleship there. This is exciting. So now we have a Wesleyan church right inside of prison. Coming in from our chat room, someone was talking about a program called I Read that allows, you know about that program. Tell us a little bit about that program.
It allows the I Read program that's in the schools, or the I Read program that's in the prisons?
It doesn't say. So it just says that the results show by middle school. So just gonna basically, what's the concept, and then we'll move forward.
There's an I Read program that's in the elementary schools that helps the children progress through the reading platform, and that helps to hopefully catch the kids that are falling through the cracks. But unfortunately, there's not as many resources in the inner city schools. The poverty-stricken schools, there's just not the resources, and there's not the parental involvement. And I don't think it's because the parents don't care. I think it's because the moms are out there working 2-3 jobs, just trying to take care of their kids. And so the kids fall through the cracks, and that's the unfortunate part. And the cycle of mass incarceration, which is a generational cycle, just continues. And so,
Yeah.
but when they get to prison, the reading programs are there as well. They have an equivalent to the iRead program in prison, which they take it to a different level. Of course, it's not the Dr. Seuss books, but it helps them nonetheless.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the things that's emerging in our conversation is that there are layers. There are layers and interconnected layers, and it's almost as though they're different threads, and we only get to pull on a few of them today. But Bernie, because when we think back, someone mentioned in the chat room that Malcolm X got started in prison, and the Nation of Islam has been so successful in prison, bringing a discipline, bringing,
It has.
So tell us about when you came in, were there any pushbacks, or were there any clashes between communities, or things that had to be overcome?
You know what? There was a little pushback from a couple of the men. And you're right, the Nation of Islam, actually, the Muslim faith is the fastest growing faith inside the prison system. And there's Qurans everywhere. And so we have to counteract that. But there was a little pushback. I had one gentleman who was a devout Christian come up to me and say, women aren't supposed to do this. And I said, okay. And he said, so you need to tell me why you can. And I said, well, you need to tell me why I can't. I said, because God told me I can. I said, so you can, and so he said, well, I'm going to be watching you. And so then eventually he came up and told me it was all good. But the other religions, it's been very interesting. So in the Banding Together book, during the summer months, they go through the Old Testament. And there was a particular day last summer where we were in the book of Genesis. And one of the gentlemen who is a Muslim came up to me and he said, you're reading that book. I know that book. He's like, we read that book. And I said, well, you're welcome to join us. And he says, well, I don't think I'm going to talk. And I said, well, that's fine. About 2 months later, he accepted Christ.
Wow.
And that is the kind of thing that happens. We get people who are just interested as we're in there and talking to us, because they don't get a lot of visitors. And so we're talking religion, we're having some debates, we're talking theology, mixing it up a little bit. And they come in and they sit down and we have conversions.
Wow, Bernie, this is exciting. I'm going to move now to Deb, talk to Deb a little bit, but we're hearing God being proclaimed on the inside of a prison, and then our slogan for the Wesleyan Church, disciples making disciples, and we're hearing this happening inside the prison. That to me is just a wonderful cause of celebration. Deb, I want to talk to you for a moment, because you are the executive director of the Homestead, and you deal with people who are in prison, but they're not in a physical prison. They're coming out of a different kind of a prison. Tell us a little bit about the Homestead and how you came to be involved in those who were coming out of sex trafficking.
Yeah, wow, it's amazing to listen to Bernie and Dan even, because a lot of our girls that we work with have been in prison, have been incarcerated at one point in time or another. But yeah, I work with adult female survivors of sex trafficking. And so, yeah, they have been in a prison of their own. And what we do is we deal with the whole person, holistic. So we're not just dealing with the spiritual, even though that's a component of what we do with our ladies, a huge component. We're addressing their mental and emotional issues, their addiction issues, their relational, their physical, their spiritual issues. And then we also do career training with them, because we want them to have a career path that they can be proud of and that can sustain them financially. So, nothing wrong with an entry-level job, but like Bernie was mentioning, fast food and grocery, the grocery stores and that kind of thing, nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. But usually it doesn't sustain financially, and they have to have more than one job in order to sustain. So we want an actual career path for our ladies. So we do that through job apprenticeships so often, where we get a business man or woman who will take one of our gals under their wing and will apprentice them in an actual career, a trade, like dental assisting, dog grooming, property management, floral design, all of those apprenticeable trades, so that our gals can step into the future with an actual career path. Yeah, I first became, just even interested in it. I had a couple of family members who had been in the sex industry at one point in time, and I was very curious. So back in 2009, it was actually October of 2009, I came to Wesleyan headquarters because there was Hands That Heal training. And I think the Wesleyan Church was partnering with, a number of different efforts, Salvation Army and some others, and had an excellent training. And so there was like 4 days of drinking from a fire hydrant, really, on international, national, scope of this whole trafficking issue. And but the stat that stuck in my head from that training that was just alarming: hundreds of thousands, particularly women and children, being sucked into this every year in our country and our world. And yet they'd only identified 100 beds in the United States at the time for those women specifically needing assistance and wanting out and wanting the help. And so when I came back to our church here in Manhattan, a Wesleyan church here in Manhattan that I was executive pastor of, I told our women's ministry team, there's about a dozen of us, the stats. And I mean, we just felt such a conviction that the Lord wanted us to do something. We didn't know what. And so, you begin to pray. We began to pray as a team. We began to read books, educate ourselves more on it. As we got more educated, we did awareness event, but we're still praying the entire time. We were doing prayer drives to the places where we knew this was happening, even in our area, truck stops and hotels and that kind of thing. And after 2 years of praying and getting educated about it, one of the gals in our team, and this was tragic, influenza A and B attacked her heart and she died within a few days. It was 38 years old, 4 little kiddos, husband. And anyway, her husband, knowing how passionate she was about this, he donated a large sum of money to get this ministry started. Well, we still didn't know what is that, what is that ministry, Lord? But I knew the Lord was beginning to move. 2 months later, a house was donated. And a month later, new furniture filling the house was donated. And, it just kind of unfolded from there, where we opened our doors in July of 12, had our first 2 ladies in August of 12. So, and they come from all over the United States. Yeah.
Well, Deb, let me ask you this, because I see a common thread of just 2 ordinary women, you and Bernie,
Yes.
living your life. And when you paid attention to a statistic, and came to this conference at headquarters, I remember hearing about that conference. And Bernie, you heard the Lord talking to you. It shows if one person, because a lot of people say, well, it's just too big a problem. When you hear those, there's nothing that can be. What can I do? But here we have 2, and excuse the phrase, ordinary women. You're allowing God to use you to address something, and look where when you took that step forward, then money came, then a house came, then you were able to interact with the victims. Bernie got into one prison and then another, and then she could just talk all day about the doors that are opening. But it started with you not just dismissing what you'd heard. But I want to ask you, Deb, because a lot of people will say, well, hey, in our community we don't have any sex traffickers in our community. We're out in the suburbs. We're out in the woods, and this is not a problem. How do people recognize sex trafficking, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, so much of it is on the internet now. I mean, basically, that's where the business end of everything is happening. And that's where the arrangements are being made, is on the internet. So if you're in a rural community and you have internet access, I guarantee you it's happening in your community. When you hear our ladies talk, you will hear not just large cities where they're transported around, but very rural communities as well. And so this can go, I mean, it's just so underground in so many ways that you really, it's a hard to detect, because it's not just ladies standing out on the street corner anymore. It's not that kind of thing. Maybe there are areas in the larger cities that's still happening, but for the most part, it is on the internet.
Wow. So not only has the world turned digital and the church has to go digital and Zoom, but you now are fighting something that is just exploding on the internet. Tell us about, though, for the women who are in your home, tell us about the discipleship piece and some of the transformations you've seen in their lives.
Well, I tell you, when I hear Bernie talking about, just the discipleship happening in the prisons and incarceration and such, it makes me so grateful, because I believe that gives anyone being released and coming back out, of prison a leg up for sure. They've got the Holy Spirit within them and the Word of God being planted in them. But we begin to address then the mental health and the addiction issues and the trauma that's happened. And we also do reintegration. That's a real strong point of ours. So they oftentimes will come out of trafficking or come out of incarceration, whatever the case may be. And it's really tough for them to get a job. It's really tough for them to manage their own life or to have their own place. And many times drugs has been a part of the whole thing. So anyway, we begin to address, every area of their life. And then spiritually, when you're talking about discipleship making, really we use an incarnational model. Jesus did incarnational ministry. He met people where they were and helped them get to a better place in their lives, basically. And so we meet them with non-judgment. We meet them with just unconditional love. And, that begins to develop, because so many of our gals have trust issues. It begins to develop that trust. And I think our ladies have to see the tangible before they can even comprehend the intangible. It's like if this whole wonderful network of folks that love Jesus can love me, knowing what I've done, where I've been, then maybe a God can love me. So it's like the tangible to the intangible. And I say intangible in a way that, Jesus isn't standing here with us right now, literally. And so the gals have a hard time with that leap sometimes, that leap of faith, just realizing and knowing he's there. So I do a weekly Bible study with our ladies. It's not a typical Bible study because we use faith-based recovery books like Boundaries and Safe People helping them to discern healthy between non-healthy, safe, and unsafe. Because honestly, the boundaries and the discernment just isn't there a lot of times. And we do no stones. I think one of the areas that has been very overlooked in this arena of ministry is sexual addiction. Most of our ladies, 96%, 98%, have been sexually abused as children. And so that has cultivated them into a sexual world where core needs, for love and belonging and safety and value and significance, all of those things, purpose and meaning, they've all been answered through sex. And so really it's so much about unlearning and relearning, like the renewing of the mind, like scripture says, and our ladies really have to be, two of our screening tools is ready and able. Because are you ready to change your life? Because you're the only one that can. We can put the greatest resources around you and the greatest support around you, but you're still that engine of change. I can't change someone. They have to be willing. And even the Lord, he won't force change on someone. He's a gentleman. He will, as they invite, as they surrender, as they say yes, he comes and he does the inner work needed. And then the able part, are they stabilized in the trauma? Are they stabilized in the mental health area? Are they stabilized in the addiction issues so that they can actually work the program and even do the career training? So discipleship looks like not only the Word of God. Of course, we all go to church together, we worship together, they're in Bible study with me. We come at it, all of our volunteers are Christ followers. We have over 100 volunteers. Um, you know, we come at it from that perspective always. But at the same time, not everybody that comes into the program is a Christ follower already, or they might be very young in their faith. So again, incarnational ministry, meeting them where they're at, helping them get where they want to go. I think that, that's how it works with us.
Pastor Deb and Pastor Bernie, I just want to say that I do have a question for you, but I just want to say how excited I am being a part of the Wesleyan Church, where women pastors are leading so dynamic ministries, such cutting edge ministries. So I just want to say I'm proud of the Wesleyan Church, but also so much very excited about great leadership coming from amazing, gifted, called, anointed women of God like both of you. So it's exciting to me to be sitting on this panel with both of you. And Kim, I don't leave you out. I have talked often of your great leadership. So I just want to mention how exciting that is to me. And Deb, I have a particular question. Like our church back in Florida, we've been out of Florida for a few years now, but got real excited about, convicted, and then excited about let's do something. So we educated, but then it was very difficult. There was a big jump of like, how do we figure out who to serve? And so you talked about like those first two women coming, I think in August after you opened in July, but can you just walk us through some of that? Like, I think there's a lot of us out there in the Wesleyan Church who know how to build an organization, a ministry, raise funds, put stuff together, find donors, all that stuff. But then the place of like, do we jump on the internet and start searching for women? Did you connect with other ministries already involved? Like, what do we do? Like, what would it look like? Help us overcome maybe a fear factor or an unknown factor of like, okay, they're on the internet, but did you just open your doors and post something on the internet? How did you connect with those first women and start build that momentum of finding those ones that were ready to serve?
I did some research of my own and found out what organizations and ministries across the country are doing that initial rescue and stabilization. And so I sent those ministries and organizations an email. It was an introduction email. It just had a short letter from me saying, hey, I know that you're rescuing gals from this, and you might be looking for a next step. And we would be one of those next steps that you might consider. And here's what we offer, and it's free of charge. And you get them here, and then they can live here free for up to 2 years. And this is what we're going to be doing with them. So I began to get emails and phone calls from all over the United States at that point.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that, connecting to those who are already doing the work and providing the next step, like collaborative work. That's fantastic. I love it, and really helps like bridge that gap of what it looks like to make those connections. That's great. Thanks.
The other collaborative thing that we're doing, Dan, as you mentioned, collaboration. I think one of the things that we had, Kim had talked to us about too, was some of the surprises. One of the surprises has been the importance of laity. Professional services, that's a hands down given. They've got to have mental health care. They've got to have addiction help. They've got to have those services. But the laity is just as important as the professional services, is what I have found out in 8 years. That loving acceptance and support of just people like you and I walking alongside them is just as important as the necessary professional services. So that collaboration of pulling together the people in the community to get on board, to embrace this, the gals, and to embrace what we're doing and walk alongside in a loving, unjudgmental manner has just, it blows their socks off. They just can't even believe that people love and accept them for right where they're at. And that, opens the door then for the spiritual and for all of the other exciting opportunities they have, and gives them that hope and that drive, that motivation to want to change their life.
You know, Deb, I'm going to ask both you and Bernie to put in the chat room how folks can connect with your ministries, because folks are asking, and they're getting excited as they hear you talk. So churches who are thinking about this and want to just kind of connect for further conversation, if you would put some contact information in the chat room, and Stefana will help get it there. Um, the question that I have, just pressing a little further, is what happens next? And both of you in your ministries point towards that. So the person comes out of prison, right? They've been discipled in the prison, and then they come out. What happens, Bernie? What how does your ministry? I think there's some new things on the horizon. Tell us about that, and then we'll come back to Deb, because you're talking about training and things that happen at the homestead. And I want you to just think of a story of someone who went out, because this models for us what can be. Bernie, why don't you go first?
Well, what happens next is when they get out of prison, they have to find a place to go. So Mercy Unleashed, we're in the process of opening a re-entry center. I had given the statistic earlier that 600,000 people come out every year and 600,000 people go in every year to prison. A lot of those people are the same people, because recidivism is people who come out of prison and then reoffend and go back in. The recidivism rate is very high. It can actually be upwards of 80% within 9 years of people getting out of prison. So statistically, Baylor University did a study, a 40-year study, in a book called More God, Less Crime, which is a great read. And statistically, if you have Jesus on the inside, like we're giving the guys, and like they're going and doing, and then you connect on the outside with a Christ-based community of fellowship where you're welcomed, recidivism drops by 60%. So a lot of the men and women who come out of prison, they have so many hurdles. They can't live anywhere because they're a felon. They can't get a job because they're a felon. I mean, and so what we're opening up is the Mercy Unleashed Reentry Center. And we are in the process of working with my district to get a piece of property where we'll open up our first place. At this particular place, we'll be able to house 15 men, which isn't a lot, but it's a start. And but then we'll also be able to resource the men that are coming out, which means they'll be able to come just like the women that Deb was talking about. The men that come out of prison, they're traumatized. A lot of them have been sexually abused. Most of them are addicts, whether alcohol or drugs. And if they didn't have these troubles when they went into prison, they have them when they leave. Being in prison is traumatizing. And so we resource them. We will be able to resource them at the center and help them to get the help that they need. We're partnering with HEPZibah 642 in offering trauma-informed care to the men, teaching them how to be better parents. Most of these kids, most of the men have children. And these children, they've been traumatized because their dad's in prison. And a lot of them have been in the system, the foster care system. So helping all of this goes together. And even with the sex trafficking, all of that, I mean, it all is interconnected. It's just this huge web of misery. But with God, it's better. And so that's what we're trying to do, is open this reentry center. And the goal is for us to be able to open reentry centers all over the country. The first goal is to handle the state of Indiana, hopefully one in every county in Indiana, and then prayerfully throughout the country, and just helping the men and women be able to get a proper footing. And they'll also be allowed to stay at this place for 2 years, just like Deb was talking about with the women,
Wow.
because that's about how long it takes for transitional care.
Well, Bernie, nobody can accuse you of having a small vision. I love it. I love it. I love it. Deb, I know that the Homestead just had I think you had a fundraising event recently, like this weekend. And I saw that it mentioned next step, a homestead plane. I can't even read my own writing. But tell us about, there's something that's coming.
Yes, we have one home here, residential home here in Manhattan, Kansas. And so when we were thinking about, expanding, it's like, okay, do we open another home right here in Manhattan, or do we go to a nearby community and open a home? They're residential, so they're not clinical feeling or even a dorm feel. It's a home. And so we get so many pro bono services for our ladies. I mean, chiropractic care, massage therapy, salon services, horse therapy, dental, medical, mental health and addiction, trauma. We get all of those services pro bono for our gals here in the community with partnerships with professionals. And so we work with probably up to a dozen ladies a year because we're long-term care. And so it only made sense to go an hour away to Salina, Kansas, to open a second home and set up all of the professional services there and have a second home there so we can get the pro bono services there. Much easier to get in a city our size. We're probably, well, even with the university, we're probably only 75,000, so much easier to get professional services for 12 than 24 in this community. So, if we work with up to 12, we will work with up to 12 to 13 over in Salina as well. We have a house already. It's furnished. We're just raising the funds and setting up the professional services over in Salina right now for a second home. And that'll double our bed space.
That's exciting to hear with both the vision and plans for moving forward. I do have another question, and for both of you, for Bernie and Deb, about systems that are behind these numbers that you're talking about and behind the men and women that you are serving. And so I'd love to hear from both of you. And it's a question that has come up in our social justice, racial justice introduction as well, this question of how do we move towards getting to the systems behind that are recreating and causing this injustice to continue. So I think about mass incarceration being tied to racial differences that we talked about in the opening slides, and just the massive growth of that. So Bernie, on that side, how do we what is happening as far as where do you see the role of really getting behind those numbers? And then the same with the sex trafficking, like rescuing woman by woman is so good, but then also we want to get to the side of, well, why are they getting sucked in? Who's doing that? Who's making the demand for sex trafficking, and getting behind those systems as well too. So thoughts on both of those? What is our response, or what are you doing, and how can we join that?
Well, as far as the sex trafficking, I can speak up on that. It is a simple supply and demand. It's a simple business model. So until we eliminate demand, if there was no demand for those kind of services, then there would not need to be supply. And there's lots of money involved here. We're talking like $150 billion a year worldwide. And so a lot of evil people have jumped on this bandwagon to make money like that. But it's because there's a demand. So I think pornography is one of the big issues that fuels demand, because once you get involved in porn, what you have, it's progressive and it's addictive, and so more indifferent. And they begin to cross lines. And one of the lines that gets crossed is, I want an actual person. Pictures are fine, or whatever, videos until a certain point, and then it's, I want an actual person. And so many of our gals, have been in hotel rooms with white collar men married with children, talk about their wives and their children, but they want to do things sexually that they don't want to ask their wife to do, because they've been into pornography and the different places that takes them. And so, basically starting to look at demand, and why is there such a demand in the U.S. The United States is one of the worst, especially for child porn and child sex trafficking. So it's absolutely frightening. The stats, if you look at Barna stats, even in the church, we're over 50%, particularly men, in pornography use, and pastors as well. So it's one of those things that I think the enemy is really getting a hook in a lot of good people and taking them down roads that they never thought they'd go down, which is tragic.
Deb, when you say that, it just reminds us of this whole, when we talk about holistic discipleship, because sometimes we look on the side of, the person who's in trafficking or the person who's in prison, but there's another side of the folks who are in church. And
That's exactly right.
when you go to, I remember a time when I was trying to, the ministry, there was a ministry that gives gifts to children in prison, whatever, from their parents, whatever. And we had folks who said, hey, they're there, they don't deserve any help, they don't deserve a reach out, they don't deserve so we had even some real resentment that we would even be involved in any way in prison ministry or ministry to prisoners and their families. And so the discipleship issue is not just on the side of those who we're reaching out to, who are prisoners or who are in sex trafficking. There's also a counter discipleship piece of us learning to be incarnational and accepting, because let's face it, when these folks, would they be welcome when they come, would they be welcome in our churches?
Well, and that is actually the answer to Dan's question, is what can we do? Obviously, the criminal justice system is a huge nut to crack. And there's so many layers to that onion. But what can we do on a tangible lesson or on a tangible level as pastors and as people? Welcome ex-offenders into your church. I cannot tell you how many pastors I've spoken to who don't want them at their church. One of the services I provide on the inside is, as men get close within 6 months of relieving, I connect them with a church on the outside. I give them a form to fill out. What are you looking for? Where are you going? What are you looking for in a church? What can you offer a church? And then I try my best to start with a Wesleyan church to find a place to send them. And I have been told no more than I've been told yes. Oh, we're not set up for that. The thing is, you have no idea who's sitting in your pews. You don't know if they've been in prison. You don't know if they were arrested for drunk driving last weekend. You don't know if they're cheating on their spouse or if they're looking at pornography. We are all sinners and we all fall short of God's glory. But as the church, we are supposed to welcome everybody. And so if I call you and ask you, hey, I've got a guy that needs a church. As a pastor, our job is yes, 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 Lord, how can I help? Send me. And that is what the church needs to do. That's our next step, is to welcome everyone.
I think, in addition to that, if I can speak on that too, is just re-educating our own folks in our congregations. Re-educating we had to do that here at our church. Before we opened our doors, we basically educated and prepared our church for incarnational ministry. I just don't think it's a natural thing. I think the assumption is that people that are incarcerated or people who have been in the sex industry, they wanted to do that. That was a desire of theirs. And I think that's a huge misconception.
Absolutely.
So many of our ladies, the trajectory started for them very early in their life with sexual abuse. And then, they get into addiction issues and they meet with the wrong people. They're hooked up with the wrong people. They're ripe pickings for predators with broken homes and other things going on. And so they're on a trajectory. And I have to look at my own life and say, would I be on that same trajectory perhaps if I had similar?
But for the grace of God,
things happened to me. So.
Wow. This has been such a rich conversation. Our time is up and looks like we're just getting started and wanting to get into some more issues, but our time is up. But I have to just bring in just two announcements. One comes directly out of our conversation. So I'm speaking from the Catalyst corner now, our catalytic conversation. We actually have our catalytic leader for Compassion Ministries is starting a book study and this whole concept of preparing the church to be ready to do some of these things. The gospel comes with a house key, practicing radically ordinary hospitality in a post-Christian world. So Tammy, Ms. Selvishik is going to be leading that. So if you want to join in. This is just to kind of break up some of the fallow ground in our own hearts. That's happening. Also want to mention, don't forget, Megan Williamson is actually going to show us how to use a new discipleship app that you put on your phone and your computer, and that's this Thursday. So go on to our website and look at the Catalyst conversations tonight. Meredith Griffin is holding the African American discipleship conversation. So go on to the website and take a look. And then last, as we wrap up, next month, November, it's a big month, November 10th, discipling across the aisles. Because we know that after the election, in our churches, half the country's going to be happy and no matter what happens, and half the country's going to be sad, and there's going to be a lot of emotions. So we're going to talk about that. So get ready for the next conversation, Discipling Across the Aisles, November 10th at noon. Well, I want to thank you, Deb. I want to thank you, Bernie. I want to thank you, Dan, for this conversation. We've put your contact information in the chat room, and we just, this is real discipleship in real places. It's not just in the church, but it's in prisons, and it's in recovering communities like the Homestead. And I just want to celebrate what God is doing. And we're thankful for your two voices of just when you said yes, and all that's unfolding and continuing to unfold. You're going to opening another house, Bernie, and Deb, you're opening another location. All of this came from a yes to God. So really glad that you were with us, and let's all just keep making disciples who make disciples.